Good morning, children. My name is Sinu Thara Cherian and I handle social science for class 5. The topic for today is towards freedom. So, the learning objectives for this particular chapter will be to learn about the British rule in India, to understand the reasons of discontent among Indians over the British rule, to be aware of the reasons of the revolt of 1857 and their results, to comprehend certain terms like sati, widow remarriage, sepoy mutiny and INC, also to know about the various social reformers. Now, before we go on to the topic, we get into the chapter, I want to sort of brief you on these terms we be coming across with. First is sepoy mutiny. Now, who are sepoys, children? Sepoys are the soldiers who worked for the British, the Indian soldiers who worked for the British. Revolt. Revolt means rebellion. Sati is the wife being burnt of the funeral pyre of the husband. Social reformer. Social reformer is a term we use for people who bring in reforms, people who bring in changes into the society. Widow remarriage. Widow remarriage is marrying of women who lost their husbands, who remarry. Nationalism and Indian National Congress. Nationalism is the feeling of unity among Indians. Now, the main topic for today is under towards freedom, children, is the expansion of East India Company. How did the East India Company establish themselves in India and how did they conquer our country? The first point is trade. India has always been rich in textiles, jewelry and spices. So, the Arabs took advantage of it and they started trading with us. Along with the Arabs came the Dutch, the French, Spanish and also the British. So, among all these, the British emerged the most powerful. What did the British do? The English started buying things from India at a very cheap rate and sold goods to other countries. So, they made a very huge profit. Apart from all this, the East India Company, also under the British, they waged wars, the Battle of Plassey, the Battle of Buxar, where the Emperor Alamshir II was defeated and the Emperor gave them permission to collect taxes and collect provinces in Bengal. So, again the British set its foot in our country. The Anglo-Maratha War, the Anglo-Sikh War, the Anglo-Mysore War also helped the East India Company of the British to set its pace in India. Slowly, the East India Company came to known as the Government of India. When the East India Company came into picture, there was a lot of dissatisfaction, anger among the Indians. What were the reasons of the dissatisfaction? What were the reasons of discontent? The first being the condition of these various sectors of people. The farmers. The farmers were allowed only to produce indigo and cotton, which the British bought from our country and they went and sold at a very higher price in their country and the rest of the countries. The farmers had to pay taxes, heavy taxes, even during droughts and floods, which actually led them to starvation. Next, we come on to the craftsmen. Craftsmen were basic weavers, weavers in the handloom industry. The handloom industry suffered. Now, how did this happen, children? The British imported cheap mill-made cloth from England and sold that at a very high price here. The handloom industry suffered very badly. So, the fate of the farmers also was the same as the fate of the craftsmen. Next we come to the traders. The traders were not allowed to produce the goods of their choice. We had to produce the goods what the English told us, what the British told us. What about the princes and rulers? The kingdom of these princes and rulers started being attached to the British. If the prince or the ruler of a particular state, of a particular province, didn't have a male heir, the East India Company made sure that the province had to be attached to the kingdom of the British. Okay, now let's come to the revolt of 1857, or in other words called Indian Rebellion of 1857. Rebellion means revolt or protest. The rebellion was mainly by the Indian soldiers called sepoys. So it was called the Sepoy Mutiny, the Indian Mutiny. It was also called Indian insurrection by the British, or the First War of Independence. So although there were a lot of protest among the Indians, there were a lot of discontent and dissatisfaction. There was no any kind of unified effort among the Indians to revolt, to rebel against the British. So this Indian Rebellion of 1857 was also called as the First War of Independence. Then there were various reasons for the causes of rebellion. Now all these sectors of the country joined the rebellion apart from the soldiers. The farmers, the traders, the weavers, the craftsmen, all sectors joined the rebellion apart from the sepoys. Now what were the main causes of the rebellion, or what sort of provoked the sepoys of India to rebel against the British? And there was a kind of unified effort, there was a kind of unity among the Indians when it came to the rebellion, even though a lot of provinces, a lot of rulers, they were very compliant with the British. They were happy with the British rule till some kind of acquisition happened. Now the main causes, we are coming to the main causes of the rebellion. So the Indian soldiers in the British army had to bite greased wrapper from the cartridge, which had to be inserted into the rifle. So that rifle was called the Enfield rifle. So hence this terminology. So these grease wrappers were covered with the skin of pigs and cows, which hurt the religious sentiment of the Hindu and Muslim soldiers. Now apart from the soldiers who was protesting because of this rifle, there were also a lot of civilian disputes, like ordinary people like farmers, traders, weavers, craftsmen. They also started rebelling, they also started protesting. And finally, we have this terminology called Bengal Army. Now children, the army was divided mainly into three presidencies. Now these three presidencies being the Bengal Army, the Madras Army and the Bombay Army. The Bengal Army had a lot of soldiers from higher caste. Now these higher caste soldiers were given superior treatment. How were they given superior treatment? They had separate quarters to live in, they had separate quarters to dine in, and the British also sort of recognized certain Hindu festivals celebrated by these higher caste soldiers. So there was a lot of unrest, there was a lot of protest against all this in the army from the other caste, because they were treated superiorly. So these were the main causes of rebellion. Now the revolt or the rebellion started in Meerut and also spread to Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi, Bihar, Bengal, Tripura, Agra and Indore. Now when we are talking about the rebellion of 1847, we have to talk about few people like Mangal Pandey, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Rani Lakshmibai, Nana Sahib, Tantia Tope, Begum Hazrat Mahal. There are other soldiers as well, but these names have to ring a bell when somebody talks to us. Let's start with Mangal Pandey. Mangal Pandey was a sepoy who started rebelling against the commander who was at that time called James Hearson. James Hearson, the commander then at one of the BNI regiments, ordered to shoot Mangal Pandey, but Mangal Pandey shot him back. But after a few days, Mangal Pandey was hanged. Bahadur Shah Zafar was the emperor, was the king of India during the rebellion. Now, what did Bahadur Shah Zafar do? He rebelled against the British, but he was caught near Humayun tomb and exiled to Rangoon in Burma. Rani Lakshmi Bai was the widow of the Raja of Jhansi. Now, Raja of Jhansi, the king of Jhansi, they didn't have children, but they adopted. But the British refused to recognize, to acknowledge the adopted son as the next heir of Jhansi. So, Rani Lakshmi Bai started fighting against the British. Now, the revolt continued for almost a year, till 10th of June in Gwalior. Now, what happened after the revolt? The British were successful in suppressing the first war of independence. So, we can say that the first war of independence was unsuccessful. The failure of the revolt for the Indians were due to so many factors. The first factor being that the Indians were disorganized compared to the British. The Indians didn't have money and the British had good weapons. Apart from all this, after the revolt, many Indians were put in prison, but what happened is that the rule of the East India Company was taken over by the government of England in 1858. The Indian princes and rulers were allowed to rule the kingdom, but had to remain under the British rule. In 1877, Queen Victoria took the title of Empress of India on the advice of the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. There were also certain universities which opened up and Indians started being educated. Universities like the Madras University, we had the Bombay University. The Governor General of India gained a new title called the Viceroy of India. There were also abolished attempts of westernization and they tried to integrate Indian higher caste rulers into the administration. The Indians were allowed to enter the civil services. Also, the rulers and the princes started ruling their country. So, there was consultation between the ruled and the ruler. What were the social and religious reforms which happened during that time after the revolt? There were a lot of social reformers, the main people being Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Debendranath Tagore. The British had introduced modern education in India. So, once the Indians started becoming educated, there were a lot of changes, there were a lot of protest, there was a lot of eye-opening among the Indians. So, few people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Debendranath Tagore, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar worked towards eliminating social evil practices like sati, killing female babies. They also worked for higher Indian literacy rate. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was a pioneer in education. He was also a major influencer in politics and public administration and also religion. Debendranath Tagore founded the Shanti Niketan. He was the father of Rabindranath Tagore. He worked for widow remarriage and also higher Indian literacy rate. Let's come to the rise of nationalism. Educated Indians started feeling, or they started realizing that the British was exploiting them. So, this kind of feeling brought a unity among Indians. This effort or the feeling of unity brought about the rise of nationalism. The growing nationalism led to the formation of the INC or the Indian National Congress. The INC was formed by the British Allen Octavian Hume in 1885, and there were various sessions held by the INC or by the Indian National Congress every year in India. The first session had 72 delegates and the president of the INC for the first session was Vomesh Chandra Banerjee. The INC sent petitions to the government to bring reforms in India to improve the living conditions of the people of India. The British realized this, and British started also passing certain strict rules. They also adopted the policy of divide and rule by making the Hindus and Muslims fight. We come to the end of this chapter. Now, it's time for the questions to be discussed. So, these four are the major questions. How did the British exploit the farmers? Which factors sparked the revolt of 1857? What helped the British to suppress the rebellion? And how did modern education lead to the rise of nationalism in India? Okay, let's address the first question. How did the British exploit the farmers? The farmers had to pay heavy taxes even during times of droughts and floods. They were allowed to produce only indigo and indigo and cotton were sold at a very higher price in England. The profits were taken by the East India Company and not given to the farmers. So, majority of the farmers went through starvation. The second one, which factors sparked the revolt of 1857? Mainly it was the Enfield rifle. The Enfield rifle or the cartridge which was used inside the rifle. The cartridge was covered with greased wrapper of the skin of cows and pigs, which hurt the sentiments of the Muslims and the Hindus, because the soldiers had to bite the greased wrapper off the bullets of the cartridges before inserting it into the Enfield rifle. What helped the British to suppress the rebellion, or how were the British successful in suppressing the revolt? The British had better weapons, the British had money, and they were organized compared to the Indians. The last one, how did modern education lead to the rise of nationalism in India? Once the Indians became educated, once they started going to the universities, the Indians realized that the British were exploiting them. So, this feeling of unity among the Indians, this feeling that they were exploited, led to the rise of nationalism, and it also led to the formation of the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress met every year. The Indian National Congress was formed by Alan Octavian Hume, and the first session was in Bombay. It had 72 delegates, and the president was Mumesh Chandra Banerjee. The Indian National Congress also sent petitions to the government to bring new reforms to India to improve the living conditions of the poor in India. Thank you.